Please welcome Peter St. John, Vice President of Partnerships at The Atlantic.
Hello, everyone. I'm Peter St. John, Vice President of Partnerships at The Atlantic, and we are delighted for you to join us for today's timely conversation on progress and innovation. How do we solve the world's most important problems? This afternoon, we'll celebrate science, technology, and the latest inventions and innovations shaping our world. You'll hear from researchers, technologists, and trailblazers navigating the complexities and opportunities that these advancements entail. Before we begin, I want to thank our underwriter, Calm, for their support of The Atlantic's journalism. And please take a moment to silence your cell phones, but keep them close by. If something you see or hear today captures your attention, we encourage you to share it with your social network. And please use the hashtag TAF24. Now, let's begin this afternoon's conversations. Thank you.
For a conversation on the future of mental health in the digital age, please welcome Jonathan Haidt, social psychologist at New York University Stern School of Business, with Derek Thompson, staff writer at The Atlantic.
Everyone, good afternoon. John, you have called what's happening to children right now the greatest destruction of human capital and potential in history. Mm-hmm. That is a massive claim.
Yep.
Defend it.
Well, so I'm just shopping it around now. It wasn't in the book. But you know, the book, The Anxious Generation, and the debate has all been about mental illness. Like the whole debate is it going up? How much? Just about depression, anxiety, mental illness. But as I've gone on, what I've come to see is actually it's not just mental illness. It's also that education is declining. And you have a great article summarizing it. It's like it sure looks like the phones are making us stupid.
Something like that.
Because it's not just the U.S. It's globally, and everybody thinks, oh, COVID. Like, no, we made progress in education until 2012. Kids were getting smarter on average, and then it starts dropping. And that's around the world, not just here. So if you imagine having about a third or a quarter of, about a third of the next generation be mentally ill, especially anxiety. Imagine that everyone's on average getting less intelligent. Imagine that all around the world, young people find it harder to focus. I mean, I don't want to compare it to World War II. I mean, that was a pretty big destruction of human capital and human potential. But like, other than the two world wars, nothing has ever happened in history that had a global effect, bringing down the potential for flourishing, success, innovation, creativity. So yeah, I'm really alarmed. Now, this is a newer claim. I could be wrong. I'd love people to push back, but this is what I'm saying these days.
Here's how I'd like to structure the conversation. I'd like to talk about ways that you might be wrong, and then if you persuade me that you're right enough, we'll talk a little bit about solutions. So here's one way you might be wrong. Mm-hmm. We have been freaking out about technology, roughly speaking, forever. Yeah. In the 1990s, we were afraid that video games were making children violent, ironically at the same time that all the crime statistics showed that America was getting safer. You go back several hundred years before that, there was lots of argument that the printing press was leading to the religious wars in continental Europe. That was quite a destruction of human capital, 100 years wars. You go back.
It wasn't global though, but okay.
It was local, but so were the effects of printing at the time, I suppose. You go back 2,000 years before that, and Plato, I guess quoting Socrates, was arguing that the written word was lobotomizing our ability to be creative and to remember things because we kept exporting our memories and writing them down. You've written a book, so obviously you disagree at least with the Plato hypothesis. Why aren't you just recapitulating the most familiar error of public intellectuals, which is to blame the newest technology for whatever sins we see around us?
Yeah, that's right. That is the main argument against me, and it's a very plausible argument. And a few years ago, I thought that it could be right. I don't think that anymore, and here's why. The usual thing is there's a new technology, and technology causes us to gain things and lose things, and people, especially older people, notice the things we're losing. So there's always a freak out about technology. So a technology comes, and then also kids are doing something different, and people say, well, this must have caused this. And usually it didn't, or it was only part of the picture. So that's what all the previous moral panics have been. This one is really different for a lot of reasons. One is in previous moral panics, it's always driven by the media playing up bizarre stories that might never have happened or maybe happened once. So some kid read comic books and then he killed his mother. And maybe that happened once, maybe it happened 0 times. But that's what a moral panic is based on, because people want to believe it's the comic books, and so they jump to that. This is entirely different. On this one, everyone has seen it in their own children or in children of people they know. This is not being driven by the media. Parents have seen it. Everyone's uncomfortable with it. Whenever I'm interviewed by a journalist with kids who are teenagers, before the show starts, they would say, I've seen it in my own kids. So that's entirely different from previous moral panics. Another is that with previous moral panics, you didn't have kids in the 50s saying, please, comic book makers, please stop making the comic books so addictive. I can't stop reading them. They liked the comic books. But we just had an article, I teamed up with the head of the Harris Poll. We had a survey, which put this New York Times a few days ago, that Gen Z, when you ask them, do you wish that TikTok was never invented, half say yes. Even though they use it hours a day, it's not because they love it, it's because they're trapped. They have to use it. So this is just very different in a lot of ways from previous moral panics, although it's a perfectly legitimate idea to start off by saying it's similar.
I think it's really interesting that if you go to the CDC, and the CDC has done this survey where they've asked young people, I think it's high schoolers, how often or whether they feel, I believe the term is constantly hopeless or depressed. And that is a line that just goes up and up and up, especially since 2012. And to your thesis, I think one thing that's very powerful about it, not only do you see a clear inflection point around 2012, but also that number is going up for everyone. It's going up for LGBTQ, it's going up for straight kids, it's going up for white and black and Hispanic, it's going up for boys and girls, different rates,
Red
but
state,
the trend
blue
line
state,
is
left, right,
every single state, including Washington, D.C. I agree with you, and I've written that I agree with you, starting maybe at 40%, then 60%, then 70%, and 80%.
It's been thrilling to watch
I
that
feel like,
go up in
right.
writing.
Yes, speaking of another line that's just going up. Let me tell you why I'm not yet at 100%. And maybe this will be an interesting opportunity for you to close that final gap.
Okay.
Smartphones in the industrialized world are everywhere. But the best evidence of rising anxiety and depression is in the English-speaking world and in Scandinavia, which is also a somewhat English-speaking world, a very English-fluent world.
Yeah.
It seems difficult to imagine how the phenomenon could be global, but the smartphone phenomenon could be global, but the effect on mental health is so bound by language.
Right.
And it makes me wonder whether what's actually happening is that it is Americans using smartphones, American teens, that are the originators of a kind of way of seeing the world that is more anxious and catastrophizing and negative and self-derogating. And just as Disney has successfully exported Mickey Mouse and Coca-Cola has exported soda, these teenagers, without even trying to, have exported a way of thinking about the world to the Anglospheric population of the globe.
Yes.
What's the best argument against that? That this isn't a cultural phenomenon within phones rather than a phone phenomenon?
Right. So my answer is yes and. So yes, I think that thesis is correct, and there's a lot more going on. So I'll come back to the yes in a moment. So first, let's be very clear. The entire academic debate has been over mental health, and the mental health lines are very similar in all the Anglo countries and the Scandinavians, generally in the Protestant countries, and I'll come back to that in a moment. Because the Protestant countries, Emil Durkheim wrote about suicide, and basically it's the Protestant countries which had the most freedom, and the more freedom you have, the less you're bound in, the more you kill yourself. Whereas those who are locked in, constrained, you have to go to church on Sunday, you have to say these prayers, those people don't kill themselves as much. So this is a long-standing sociological observation. How tightly people are bound in actually is protective of mental health. So I'll come back to that in a moment. But even if, the mental health is the main thing we've been talking about, but the devastation that I said in response to your first question, the loss of education, that's everywhere. It's less so in East Asia, but it is all over the Western world. And the inability to concentrate, that's everywhere. So it's not as though, talk to people in Europe, you're not going to find them saying, oh yeah, smartphones have been great for our kids. It connects them and makes them create. You're not going to find that. Everyone sees the same problems. Okay, now back to the mental health. Why does it vary? There's one region we found that in which the mental health is actually getting a little better for teens, and that's Eastern Europe. And the mental health is getting worse all over Europe, but in Southern Europe it's only a little, it's Northern Europe that it's a lot. Okay, here's one more clue. Break up the American data, high school data, by politics and by religiosity. And when you plot the lines for people on the right, for kids who are from conservative families, you get no change. Nobody's changing from like 1997 to 2011. There's no change really. And then all of a sudden, the conservative kids go up somewhat, but the liberal kids go up a lot. And the kids from religious families go up a little, and the kids from secular families go up a lot. And so especially secular liberal girls are by far in the worst shape. They had the biggest increases by far. So now back to the Anglo point. My previous book, The Coddling the American Mind, was about a set of incredibly toxic ideas that have spread on college campuses and that are associated with progressive politics, and especially young women seem to be embracing them. And so it's, everything is power and oppression, that life's a battle between good and evil, good people and evil people. And that idea is really a major cultural export of teenage Americans who are progressives. Now, the internet doesn't give a damn about national borders, but it does care about language borders. So these ideas have spread all over the English-speaking world very rapidly. And so I think, I wish I had data on the politics of British kids and Australian kids. I don't. So, but my prediction would be, if we look in the Anglo countries, we're going to see that the reason why the Anglo countries is different is primarily the kids from secular progressive families. They're the ones who really got washed away, because by those Durkheimian processes of binding, those are the kids who had enormous freedom beforehand, and freedom used to be good for mental health. The Anglo countries and the Scandinavians basically dominate all the top spots on the happiest countries in the world. Not anymore for the kids. Before 2015, you look at the list of happy countries, it's the Anglos and the Scandinavians overwhelmingly, plus Switzerland and Israel, a couple others. But there's new research, just came out last year. The young people in all those countries have plummeted so much, they are now the least happy people in their countries. So this has been a major global change in happiness.
I hadn't written this question down before, so I hope it comes out right. Here's a mental model. We're living in the middle of an epidemic. Happiness is spreading, anxiety is spreading, persistent hopelessness and depression is spreading. Conservativeness and devout religiosity are like therapeutics. They seem to have a kind of therapeutic effect.
They're protective.
They're protective, right? Paxlovid for unhappiness. What is going on here? Why would conservatism and religiosity, just spend a little bit more time here,
Sure.
Why do you think Republicans and devoutly religious Americans, and devoutly religious teenagers specifically, or teenagers in Republican and devoutly religious households, why do you think they're protected?
Right. So in the 90s, I began getting involved with positive psychology, a part of psychology looking at the positive side of life. I know indirectly the research on happiness. And so it's long been known that there are two big factors that are protective of happiness. One is being married, the other is being religious. That's been true for a very long time. And the religion, well, is it because they believe in an afterlife? No, it turns out the research, and you can find this in Robert Putnam and a bunch of others, the research is not about belief, it's about being anchored in a community. That's what's protective. So they've always been a little happier. And then there's a bigger debate. So conservatives come out as a little happier than liberals. That's been true for decades. Although there is debate. Is it a real effect? Is it a but that's a smaller effect. Okay, so those have been true for decades and decades. What I'm saying is that those differences used to be small. Now they're really big because it's those kids. So the question isn't. So the question is, as you said, why was that protective against whatever happened in 2012? And I think the reason. So my book is not just about smartphones and social media. It's about childhood. And a third of it is just about 3 chapters on what childhood is and adolescence and how you need to grow. Our growth pattern is such that you get, all around the world, there's initiation rites and you learn from the elders in your culture and you get helped to go from child to adult. And around 2012, that all just ended. I mean, when kids are on all the time, it blocks out influence from everyone else, adults especially. They're now being socialized by random weirdos on the internet, and this interferes with development. Whereas if you're a conservative in a conservative religious family, first of all, the data shows clearly, Jean Twenge has shown this, first of all, you're using social media a lot less. It's the secular liberal girls, they're the ones who are on it all day long. The religious conservative kids are not on it as much. Secondly, what they're consuming is not nearly as toxic. It's not like everything is terrible and everyone hates you because you're a girl and it's just not as toxic. So for all those reasons, it's both some things are protected, but I do think there's a recent strain of progressivism. I don't think this is true for older progressives, but a recent strain of progressivism on campus especially is particularly toxic. Greg Lukianoff calls it reverse CBT. Right. You learn the distortions of CBT rather than
behavioral therapy.
Rather than learning to stop making those distortions, like catastrophizing.
You've written that smartphones are a kind of experiment on our psychology. We've only been living with these machines for 10, 15 years, and yet they are remaking society. And we're all participating in, kind of enrolled in a kind of phase 2 clinical trial of what does this therapeutic do to our brains, and the outcomes of that phase 2 clinical trial are not exactly positive. What's interesting about thinking about smartphones as an experiment is that your book about this experiment is inspiring many experiments. California is banning smartphones in their schools, or taking smartphones out of their schools. Many states are experimenting with taking these phones out of their schools. I believe that today or this week you have, is it the Senate or the House that's marking up the Kids Online and Safety Privacy Act, COSPA, which is, again, trying to find ways to make it easier for parents to keep their most vulnerable younger tweens and teenage children off of these machines. How do you feel about the fact that your book has created a kind of experiment? How are you watching this experiment unfold?
Yeah. Oh man, I mean, I've got a big box of popcorn and I'm really enjoying it. It's, every day, I look at whatever comes in overnight, like, oh, there's another state, oh, there's another country that's going phone free, amazing. But I think what's behind your question is, because I say somewhere in the book, we're engaged in the largest uncontrolled experiment that humanity has ever performed on its children. And now I'm trying to create very rapid change, and am I playing God? Am I, what evidence do I have that this is going to work to roll back the phone-based childhood? Is that going to help our kids? So let me try this. This is another idea that I'm trying to get out. It's often said that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And so let me give you an extraordinary claim, and let's see how much evidence we think we need for this. I propose that we take American childhood in the early, 20, 30 years ago, and let's remove from it 30% of the sunshine, 50% of the outdoor time, 60% of the time with friends, 60% of the eye contact with other human beings. Let's remove half an hour sleep every night. Let's see what else. Reading. Let's remove all the books. No more books. No more book reading. Let's remove no more hobbies. Let's remove all this stuff from childhood, and let's replace it with 5 hours a day. That's the average. 5 hours a day of social media, mostly short videos. And my extraordinary claim is, this won't do anything. This won't be harmful. Okay? That is an extraordinary claim, and you would need extraordinary evidence to believe that we did this and it didn't have any effect. Okay? So I just want to make clear, the burden of proof, I have a burden of proof, but my critics are acting like the null hypothesis is that this isn't causing any problem. And every time I show evidence, they say, well, but that stuff, or this wasn't that. I mean, the burden I have to climb with these critics, they're just assuming that it's like, it's like a criminal conviction. Like we're not going to convict them unless we're certain. Well, parents all over the country, all over the world, they see the problem, and part of the reason why this is spreading like wildfire is especially the mothers. There's an intensity among mothers that I've never seen before. Much more, fathers will come up to me, oh, I loved your book. Yeah, I see it in my kids. Mothers are like, thank you. We need to act, and me and my friends, we're getting together and we're doing this. So I think that there is a need to act quickly. I think I have gathered the evidence. It's not like I'm just saying, forget the evidence. Oh my God, this is so frustrating. I've made all these Google documents with all the studies I can find on both sides since 2019. And people accuse me of cherry picking. My critics accuse me of cherry picking. I'm the only one who picks all of the cherries, puts them all out there, categorizes them, says, look for yourself. Here are the cherries, here are the cherries. There's a lot more in the correlational studies. They're almost always the correlation. In the experimental studies, if you get people off social media for more than 2 or 3 weeks, it almost always makes them better. So correlational studies, experimental studies, eyewitness testimony, the kids themselves say it, the mothers say it, the teacher, what else can I do?
Well, I mean, it's great that you built the orchard.
Yeah, thank you.
I do, however, want to return to this experiment, right? And I'm stuck now with thinking of it as a clinical trial. Like clinical trials have endpoints, right? Show me that this drug improves inflammation. Show me that this
Okay.
drug shrinks the tumor. What data, what is your endpoint from these experiments, right?
And
So
if I do
you're
this-
God, and all these little experiments are running underneath you,
Right.
right, in different countries and different states, and COSPA is passed. What needs to happen in the next year, 2 years, to prove that height is right?
Okay, if I do this, if I give you a good answer, will you go to 100%?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you-
All right. All right, here we go. Okay. So in the book, I took a risk and made a specific prediction, which is a little dangerous to do. But I said there are four norms. If we do these 4 norms, we're going to roll back the phone-based childhood. We're going to reverse the epidemic. And I said if any school or community does all 4, they will see a significant or substantial drop in anxiety and depression within 2 years. So that's, again, very risky to put a number on it. I could have just said eventually, but I said 2 years. And here's why I said it. So first, what are the 4 norms? They're very simple. Norm number 1, no smartphone before high school. Just in early puberty. Thank you. Actually, yep. Look, it's especially mothers are clapping. So smartphones are just wildly inappropriate for kids. Let them get through early puberty. They're incredible distraction devices. So let's try to just delay until high school. You can give them a flip phone or a phone watch before then. Norm number 2, no social media before 16. Social media is wildly inappropriate for kids. We would never let our kids go play in a place where lots of men from all over the world are there to see them naked. Like, that's just not something that we would do, but we do it. The 3rd norm is phone-free schools. And the 4th norm is far more independence, free play, and responsibility in the real world. Now, the reason why I took a chance and said, I think this is going to work, is we already know. So Lenore Skenazy is here in the audience with me. She wrote the book called Free Range Kids. She helped me raise my kids with that. She and I co-founded an organization called Let Grow. We have these very simple projects that give kids independence. And the amazing thing is, kids with anxiety disorders who have some independence and then they succeed, their anxiety drops within a week or 2, whereas Prozac takes 4 or 5 weeks. So we already know that for anxious kids, independence therapy actually works very quickly. So imagine a whole school giving kids more independence, a whole neighborhood. The other thing we know works very quickly is phone-free schools. So I keep putting calls out on Twitter. Can anyone find a school that went phone-free and regrets it? Never. I've never heard of it. They all say the same thing. The kids they didn't like it at first, but by 2 or 3 weeks in, they loved it. They discovered they're actually talking. And the main thing that you always hear in every article describing it is teachers say that they hear laughter in the hallways again. Because when the kids, these stupid phone bans, you can't use your phone in class. Well, yeah, you're going to be, first you use it in class, you just hide it. But in between classes, everyone's on their phone. And at lunch, everyone's on their phone. So those 2 we know have strong anti-anxiety effects. And so if people just do those 2, we're going to see a drop in those communities. And then if we add on delaying social media, which will have a huge impact, and just many fewer kids will be sextorted, cyberbullied, fewer suicides. So that one, and then what's the 4th one? Oh, and then the no smartphones till high school. So if you do all these together, what do you get? What you get is at least until high school, kids are playing with each other. They're not just doing this because all they have is a flip phone, and you can't be on a flip phone for 10 hours a day.
I want to make sure that you have time to talk about parenthood, because The Anxious Generation, your book, is not just about phones bad, phones bad, phones bad. It's about childhood, and it's about parenting. And what's changed in the last few years, last few decades, is not just the introduction of a technological instrument. It's been the introduction, I think, of a new theory of parenting. And since the 1970s, parenting in America, and especially among educated families, has really changed. It's become more intensive, it's become more nervous, it's become less likely to allow children to play in unstructured environments and more likely to structure their environments in a very organizational kid kind of way. I'm just quoting Lenore here, but I'm glad to see you nodding. And here, it can't be enough for everything to stay the same and for parents to simply say, life exists as normal, but just no phone. That will help. But you also have ideas for how parenting can change as well. Let's end there. How should parents change in terms of their relationship with their children outside of the context of the smartphone?
First, let me just say, one thing I love about The Atlantic is that it's deep and far-ranging, and then sometimes funny. There's like playfulness in the writing. And one of the funniest things I've seen in The Atlantic recently was, I think Graham Wood. Had an article on the exploding pagers in Lebanon, and he quoted the leader of Hezbollah saying, "Put your phone in a crypt, bury it, do not touch your phone." And he described this as a rare point of agreement between the leader of Hezbollah and Jonathan Haidt. So. So,
That's not bad.
but in terms of parenting, there's an evolutionary program for our species. We have a long childhood. It's really different from that of chimpanzees and other primates. We have this long period for cultural learning, and parents play a role in this. But around the world, kids aren't focused on their parents to copy, because the odds that your parents are the best models for copying are pretty slim. And so Joe Henrich at Harvard has this amazing theory about how it is we go out seeking role models. Kids are seeking role models. And so the learning, the growth happens not when they're with you safe at home. Kids need a secure base to come back to, but the whole point of it is the off-base excursions. That's where the more rapid growth and learning happens. And so we have to see our job as parents not as protecting them in a dangerous world and putting a thing around them and never letting them go into the next aisle in a supermarket because I read once in a tabloid that a kid was abducted from a supermarket. Like, that never happened. We have to get over that fearful parenting, which is what's causing us to deprive our children of autonomy and the possibility of growth. And we have to see more that our kids need independence, they need growth, they need small risks. You have to see small risks are good. You want your kid to be doing things where they could possibly get hurt, not seriously hurt, but on the playground, if they can get hurt, then they have to learn how to not get hurt, and they learn to look out for each other. So we have to have a lot more faith and trust in our kids. One thing I found when we had our firstborn, and you kept thinking he's going to die overnight, like he's going to stop breathing. He's so delicate, and I had to think I have to have faith in evolution. Evolution must know what it's doing. So our kids need that independence to grow, and we have to trust. Of course, the difficulty is we don't trust our neighbors. Mm-hmm. That's why things change. So in America in particular, we have a lot of work to do to restore community and trust. Things are so much safer for our kids than they ever were. The crime rate's down to where it was in the 60s. Drunk driving is a shadow of what it used to be. But we don't trust our neighbors. Mm-hmm. So we do have a lot of. So I can't just sit here and say, pretend it's 1963 and send your kids out and say, don't come back till the streetlights come on. We do have to be more deliberate, and I'm hoping we'll find private sector solutions to create spaces that kids can go where there's an adult around. There is an adult there, but it's not like with a whistle blow, So we're gonna have to think creatively about this, because I can't just say to parents, just get over your fears and let your kid go out. But you know what? I can sort of say it if we do it together. Because we imagine my kid going out alone. No, but imagine 5 kids going out. Now you're talking about fun, and there's a lot more safety there. So let me end on this point. We're stuck in this thing because each of us as parents, when we say, I'm not giving you a phone, and I'm not giving you social media, then we're condemning our kid to isolation. As individuals, it's hard to solve this. But the whole point of my book is collective action. These 4 norms are norms for collective action. So if you can team up with everyone in your school, or your school grade, or all the parents in your kid's class, or just the parents of your kid's 3 best friends. If you have a small group doing it, now you really can do it, and you'll help each other get over your anxieties as parents, and the kids are going to have a lot of fun, and then they're not going to miss the phones.
I say it's compelling. I'm at 98.7% right now.
I'll take it.
Thank you very much, Jonathan Haidt.
Hey, I'm Jay, and I want to invite you to spend the next 90 seconds right here in the present moment. Start by getting a little more comfortable wherever you are. Maybe relaxing your shoulders and settling in to stillness. Now, connect with your breath as it flows in through your nose and releases back out. Breathing in, feeling your body expand. Breathing out, feeling it fall. Inhaling, drawing in energy, and exhaling, landing fully in this moment. And now, let's set an intention for how you want to approach the day. how would you like to show up? What energy do you want to bring? Come back to this intention whenever you need a boost. Wishing you peace and purpose and a beautiful day.
For a session produced by our underwriter, Calm, on The Myth of a Fix, Mental Health Isn't a Problem to Solve, please welcome David Coe, CEO and board member of Calm, with Nicholas Thompson, CEO of The Atlantic.
Wow, everybody's centered and ready for this. I had a friend, I was talking to a friend from Copenhagen last week, and he has a briefing this week. He doesn't know a lot of Americans, never been to America. He was playing Ask an American. We were abroad. He's like, I got to brief all these Republican senators. He's like, should I have them do a breathing exercise beforehand? I was like, no. All right, first question for you. So I have done a lot of investigative reporting on this question. I have dug in deeply, and I believe I have found something very dark about you.
Okay. I'm ready.
I believe you are the only tech executive in Silicon Valley who allows their children to use their product.
That probably is true. Yes, I have 2 daughters who are 17 and 14, and I don't have to encourage them to use it. They use it on their own, and their friends do as well. So that's pretty cool.
That's awesome. All right, so let's talk about the evolution of Calm. So I remember when Calm came on the scene, it was just a meditation app, and now it's a mental health app, it's a sleep app, it's evolving into all kinds of stuff. What has Calm become? How did it do that, and what's it coming next?
Yeah, that's a great question. We started, for most people that know us, we started initially as meditation. Some of the things that you just saw here. We evolved to sleep, and that's when the company actually really started to shoot up the app charts, because so many people today have trouble sleeping. Over 50% of our users today come to us for sleep. And then eventually we went into different lines of business. So yeah, we've morphed from just a meditation and sleep company, and now we're really focused on your mental and your physical health, in the intersection of that.
So you must have a lot of data on sleep, right?
Yeah.
Do you? It's now September of 2024. Who's sleeping better, Republicans or Democrats?
It's bipartisan. What I would tell you, actually, that's a great question. In 2020, we actually jumped 20 spots in the App Store because election stress is real. And we saw that happen in 2020. Once again, it's also happening in 2024. And that's because when the debates, and obviously, as you know, in terms of stresses in life, as soon as the debates are over, and now you're like, go to sleep, your mind is racing, right? Yeah. And it's really hard to just shut it off. So we do find so many people turn to us in that moment, and we see our numbers actually spike there as well.
And what have you learned about what it takes for people? I mean, you've got a funny product, right? Like all the stuff that Jonathan Haidt's talking about.
Yes.
Their business model is keep you as much as possible in the phone.
Yep.
You got to get people to sleep. It's like the opposite thing. You want your like monthly average user time to be like 5 seconds. What have you learned about getting people to sleep?
I think for everyone it's a little bit, what we learned is for everyone it's a little bit different, I will tell you. My wife, for example, she uses our product all the time. I'd ask her in the beginning, who do you use to go to sleep? She's like, Matthew McConaughey. And I'd be like, of course you do. It's not my voice, it's Matthew McConaughey's voice. And then I'd be like, well, who else do you use? She'd be like, Harry Styles. I'm like, great. But what I would tell you is some people will do that. Our average user, about 10 minutes a month, 10 minutes a day, 300 minutes a month. And so what you see there is that there are a lot of folks today who will come to us with those types of narrators. Others will come to us and say, you know what, I'm okay sleeping, but I have a lot of stress during the day. Help me during the day. Yeah. And what else can you help me with? Sometimes that's breathing techniques. Sometimes it's things around mental fortitude. So there's all these things that are happening right now in your daily stresses of life that we just want to be with you in your mental health journey.
And then how do you handle the fact that like your product is an app on the most stressful thing in my life, right? Like, how do you, it would be better if your product could just exist in like an ethereal space. Yeah. But I like keep the phone out of the bedroom at night. I don't want it near me when I'm trying to relax.
Sure.
How do you deal with that dynamic?
You know, part of it that we do today, I'll tell you, and I'll tell you something that's been very real for us. We're an app that's not social. So there is no social in our app.
Yeah,
right?
Amazing. Compare with your friends. I got to sleep in 9 minutes. You got to sleep in 11 minutes. You could have points. You could get, this guy worked at Zynga. You know how to you could gamify this so well.
That's true. And we've had a lot of conversations and debates about, do you make it social? I think one of the things that we've wanted to keep core is the fact that, and this is important, I've actually had this conversation actually with my own kids, is there are times where they use apps and they don't feel better about themselves when they're finished using those apps.
Right.
And I think one of the things that's made me proud about the company we have and the product we have today is I have so many people, it's not just my kids, will come to us and say, I feel better when I use your product, not worse. And I think that's a thing that is so rewarding when you work at a company like Com.
Do you want to get out of the phone? Like, would you rather be in some kind of other device?
Well, I think a lot of times what we're trying to do is create, it's not just about the device, it's really creating healthy behaviors around it. So, for example, folks will come to us and say, you know, can you help us solve things around mental stress? What is the solve, for example? And for me, the solve isn't around.
The microphone up and down, going on and off.
Sorry, is that better?
He put the microphone to sleep. He did Calm. He did the meditation effort.
Phone,
The mic.
That's it.
Yeah.
Get you a microphone coming from here.
So, yeah, thank you. That's good. Thank you for that. No, so for ourselves, it's not really about the solve per se. It's about how do you have healthy behaviors around that. So we're really around how do you have healthy behaviors. Sometimes you will have your phone with you. Sometimes you won't have your phone with you. And it's really to develop those techniques in life so that you can really create healthy behaviors around that.
And are you seeing that there's equal knowledge? I mean, it would be a real shame if only very affluent people had figured out how to use Calm and how to get to sleep better. Are you seeing equity in the use of your app?
Yes, and it happens a couple of different ways. So you're right. We didn't build an app to make the world healthier and happier for those of you who can just pay. We really wanted to create an app that would reach everybody and help them along in their mental health journey. What we have been doing is to say, yes, we have a product that's in the App Store today. We've also actually done 3,500 partnerships with employers and growing, so they offered in terms of their benefits. And then we've also started to partner with payers as well. So we've started to do it there. What we have found is when certain payers have asked us to test in hard to reach populations, our growth has been, our engagement has been 2 to 3 times higher than their own brands. And the access has been 2 to 3 times higher, and the engagement from that has been 2 to 3 times higher.
And then back to the data, you know, we do a big partnership at the Atlantic. Has the level of stress of Atlantic employees, how much did it go up when I started as CEO?
Yeah. I would love to answer that question. I don't have that, but I'm sure it's sure it's steady.
Tell me how you evolve into more of a mental health app, right? Tell me how, like, the next step in the journey and what you can become and what you can solve. Because you have, like, a limited tool set, but a large problem space.
Yes, and for us, that journey is not just about the 160 million people that have downloaded and used the product, but it's really about where we're continuing to go. So for us today, yes, it's around your mental health journey. That's not just about the mind, it's also about the body. So there is so much about your physical health that's intertwined with your mental health. Yesterday, you did a great segment with David Coriani, the CEO of Cigna, about your mental and physical health and how deeply intertwined they are. We believe that as well. And so there's a lot of things that we're doing in our products to promote your physical health. And so you'll see that with our narrators, you'll see that around movement, and you'll see a lot more things to come with the product.
So what exactly? You're going to encourage me to move? You're going to, like... We
have that in the product today. We started around movement. I think what you'll also start to see, if I could wave a wand and, you know, being here in DC, I mean, there's so much in school today. I'll give you an example. Yeah. I talked about this last week where our children will go to school and they have an hour and it says set aside for your physical health, and they know that. So they start to build healthy habits early, and we try to instill that in them. I wish we would take a little bit of that time, it doesn't have to be the whole time, to also promote your mental health. Maybe there are ways we could start that conversation at a much earlier age, so it's not just happening about, you know, the phone and usage with apps, but it's really starting from an educational perspective as well.
So Tell me a little bit about your story. Were you always just a guy who got 8 hours of sleep, took it seriously, you meditated in the morning, you drank a lot of alkalized water?
Yeah. I would tell you I'm probably one of the most stressed people you'll ever meet.
Yeah, you and Arthur Brooks.
You know, but yes, I am pretty stressed. I think I tell this to the company. I said, every second of every day, somebody is using Calm. That is a tremendous amount of responsibility for us as a company. So we're not, sometimes people be like, what does it mean to work at Calm? Are you all meditating throughout the day? Do you work, just a couple hours and then you go off and you do nature hikes? And that's not what we do because of the responsibility that we have. And so, but we try to handle the stresses with healthy behaviors.
All right, that's a great message. I hope everybody gets good night's sleep. Thank you, David.
Yeah. Thank you very much, everyone.
That was great. Thank you.
For a conversation on the future of AI, robotics, and human-machine interaction, please welcome Rodney Brooks, founder and CTO of Robust.AI, Patty Moss, professor at MIT Media Lab, with The Atlantic's Derek Thompson.
Hello again. Patty, can we start with you? I have a question about artificial intelligence that begins with a bit of a personal confession. So I have a terrible sense of direction. I've always had a bad sense of direction. My wife says my sense of direction is actually usefully terrible because if I say turn left, we know that we should have to turn right at that intersection. Google Maps.
I have a husband like that.
You have a husband like that? Okay. Google Maps, the technology of Google Maps, makes me more omnidirectionally intelligent than the smartest omnidirectionally intelligent hunter-gatherer of 10,000 years ago, obviously. Even the smartest driver of 50 years ago. I know where everything is in the world now because I have this external brain at my fingertips. At the same time, the presence of that external brain, I feel, has also atrophied my ability to know where I am in the world. Because I can always outsource my sense of where things are in the world to my phone, I never really need to know where I am or even need to know where things are in my town. It all just lives right here. And so I think about this as an interesting metaphor or analogy for artificial intelligence, which is that artificial intelligence plus human can lead to the smartest, most creative thing in the world. But in an ironic way, if we outsource too much of our intelligence and our creativity to these devices, something inside of us atrophies. And so I guess I would love you to talk about how you see the question of whether the AI tools at our disposal today, like ChatGPT and Claude and Meta and Alphabet's work, do they really make us more creative, more intelligent, or are they, in a slyly subtle way, atrophying our skills of creativity and intelligence?
Yeah, good question. I think that the more we make AI intelligent, the more we risk making people less intelligent, actually. The reason is that as we increasingly rely on AI to help us with processing information, with making decisions, with even expressing ourselves, being creative, etc., we actually risk losing those same skills. Basically, Marshall McLuhan talked about how every extension is an amputation. And I think at the moment there isn't enough discussion out there about the amputations that we are causing to ourselves by adopting these technologies. Yes, you are becoming more productive when you work with AI, but are you really learning from all the work that you're doing, especially when you become the fact checker for an AI that may hallucinate, when AI is doing all the creative thinking, etc. So at MIT and in my lab at Media Lab, we do a lot of studies actually to verify what having AI at your fingertips does to people. And what we notice is that people actually don't necessarily make better decisions. You don't benefit from the intelligence of people and the intelligence of AI because people outsource the thinking to AI, which risks that we not only lose those skills, don't become better at solving problems, at being creative, at expressing ourselves, but it's a big problem for society as well, I think. The more we outsource, the more we risk ultimately losing ourselves over the long term.
That turn of phrase, every extension is also an amputation, is really, really memorable. Rodney, the intelligence of artificial intelligence is, I think a previous guest on this stage, Ethan Malik, called it, it has jagged intelligence, that AI can do some things with extraordinary, even superhuman ability, and yet other things that come easily to human beings it really struggles with. And there's a concept in, I think, computer science called Moravec's paradox, which is that there's this irony that if you ask a artificially intelligent machine, a robot, to walk down a flight of stairs, look at a spilled pile of pages on the ground, and then pick them up, as any 5-year-old could do, it really struggles with that task. But at the same time, you have Strawberry and these new models coming out from OpenAI today that can essentially do PhD-level advanced math. It's kind of, or almost, according to their reports.
Not MIT PhD.
No, not an MIT PhD. Okay, there we go. Certainly math that I cannot do. Let's put it that way. Why do you think, with robots, it's hard for them to do some easy things, while it's easy for them to do some hard things?
Yeah, you called this Moravec's paradox. Hans and I used to share an office when we were PhD students, and we talked about this a lot. My cartoon version of it is we evolved over 600 million years from the Cambridge explosion. But all the stuff that AI is sort of good about right now only came about in the last few 100,000 years. The rest of evolution was getting us so that we could see, notice, map, using brain structures that have developed in us in the entorhinal cortex and in the hippocampus, that are specialized for spatial understanding. And it's not just a one-dimensional thing. Language is one-dimensional, which is why the transformer mechanism of shifting by one works so well, because there's not much there. But out in the real world, it's very complicated. So I look at people who are building humanoid robots right now and trying to teach them by having a person show what they're doing. And that's sort of doing puppetry, because they're only showing the trajectory people used. But try shucking an oyster. Now, you know, you might say that's specialized, but we had to do really hard stuff a few tens of thousands of years ago when we didn't have tools. You don't follow the same trajectory. You feel, you twist, you move, you get a physical understanding of what's there. And it's a very complex, non-linear or non-sequential model of what you need to do. That's using a massive amount of brain structure, which we don't have a way of putting into digital form. Words we can put into digital form, and therefore we can have learning mechanisms that work on it in current AI systems. So I think that's where the fundamental difference comes from. It's a much more multidimensional thing that we as humans can't talk about what's internally happening, so we can't build the AI systems that can do it, because it's a different domain than what we've got access to.
I want to follow up on that as it relates to the frontier of robotics in just a second. But what you said to start that answer is so poetically beautiful that I just want to recircle it. This idea that artificial intelligence and robotics is a kind of journey through time in reverse. That in a weird way we are able to automate.
This is why he's a writer.
That we're able, these are your words, or at least this idea was embedded in your words. I'm just teasing it out. I'm just a summarizer here.
By the way, no large language model could do as well as you've done so far. So keep going. That's why you're here, to listen to him.
Stop. So if we're traveling back through time, this idea that we are automating the last 100,000 years, and then the next million years, and then the next 10 million years, and then the next 100 million years, and that it will take a long time for us to arrive at the skills that are most baked into us genetically and at a cellular level. Is this theory, is this framework of thinking about the history of artificial intelligence and the future of artificial intelligence, because it contains a prediction within it too, do you consider this idea to be mere poetry, or do you think there's something profound in this idea that we have, in fact, been able to simulate or automate PhD mathematics, which is an invention in the last 400 years, faster than we've been able to simulate something like picking up pages, which includes mechanical intelligence built over 400 million years?
It certainly is poetry. I started my career, well, I didn't start my first part of the career, but over 40 years ago, 45 years ago, I started working on very simple insect-like intelligence because having spent time with Hans, I thought, Hans Moravec, I should go back to the beginning and try to come forward. So some of us tried to come forward, and there's a whole field called artificial life, which Patty was very involved in the 35 years ago, I was involved in, where we tried to come from the far end forward. But it's really slow, hard slog, which is why perhaps this sudden flowering of hype around language.
So here's a skill that I don't know exactly how to plot along this curve of 40 years ago, 400 years ago, 400 million years ago. Companionship. On the one hand, companionship seems very, very deep. It seems incredibly profound to the human condition. And yet at the same time, I have seen headlines of people choosing, for some reason I cannot even hope to explain, to become the boyfriend or girlfriend of artificial intelligent bots. Can you talk a little bit about what the heck is going on here? How is it that we have been able to create machines, digital avatars, that people want to be friends with, even though they know there's no organic substrate to that friendship? What's happening with the state of AI companionship right now?
Yeah, some of you may be aware of these services, Replica.ai, Character.ai, etc. Millions and millions of people use these to basically have companions, AI friends, AI therapists, and more. Of course, if you can have a friend who's always available, who can endlessly talk about you, about the topics you want to talk about, who never disagrees with you, etc. There is some appeal to that. You can shut them up whenever you want to as well. So yeah, increasingly a lot of people, maybe because they are already lonely, are reverting to these bots. I think the problem is even bigger than just companion bots, actually. If you think about it, when before AI, sort of a couple of years ago, if you had a problem that needed to be solved, whether that was a problem at work, you need some help with some code, making a decision, being creative around something, or you have a personal problem with a relationship, you go to a friend, to family, whatever, a colleague. Now we go to AI. We will increasingly replace basically human interaction with AI, because it's convenient and it can help you, etc. And that will actually have an effect, I think, on our loneliness and our social capital and social connectivity, as well as on our mental well-being. it has been shown that, well, since the 70s roughly, people spend more and more time alone, and of course social media and the pandemic and so on have made that even a lot worse. 10 years ago, we spent on average 6 hours with other people in person per week. Now that is 3 hours or less. And with the advent of AI, I think that will go even down. That time will even be reduced more. So we really risk sort of the degradation of our social capital, our social fabric with that, but also problems with mental health, depression, increased depression, anxiety, loneliness, etc., which have very much been correlated with sort of a reduction in time spent talking to others.
Because Jonathan Haidt was just on this stage, therapy is really top of mind for me. And so I'm very curious about how you see the rise of AI therapy intersecting with therapy demand. And I can imagine two different futures that are very, very opposite. On the one hand, you could see that people rely less on human therapists as they come to trust AI therapists more and more in terms of answering their questions. You know, we talked about anti-CBT in the previous session. What if we design AI agents that understand cognitive behavioral therapy and dialectical behavioral therapy and can impart the same kind of wisdom that a trained PhD could, but in an AI setting? That's one possibility. There's another possibility, which is similar to the effect of Excel on spreadsheet work. In the 1960s, 1970s, there were not very many Americans who were working in spreadsheets. The invention of Excel did not reduce the number of people working in spreadsheets. By making spreadsheet work easier, it actually dramatically expanded the number of people who could use this technology. And by analogy, one could argue that once people find it easier to hook up with an AI that teaches them cognitive behavioral therapy, they begin to realize just how rich cognitive behavioral therapy can be for their anxiety and happiness, and then on-ramp that AI experience into an experience with a therapist, such that the technology amplifies psychology rather than replacing it. Optimistically, don't you think it's possible that in some of these cases, AI isn't going to merely replace human work or human agents? It will somewhat ironically and unexpectedly sometimes expand our interaction with humans in certain ways.
I think the situation is complex, actually. If you take something like mental health and therapy, unfortunately, it's not very accessible right now to people. There are not enough therapists out there. It is expensive. You have to wait till you get an appointment. You see your therapist once every 2 weeks or whatever, while AI is always available 24/7 in the middle of the night when you can't sleep because you're worrying about something. So there are a lot of, I'm not an AI pessimist necessarily, but I think we have to be a little bit more thoughtful and deliberate about how we design AI to fit in a human context so that ultimately the benefits, we can have benefits and not just negative consequences. So the same is true for therapy. I think there's a lot of very interesting use cases for AI therapy, and our experiments show that people actually weirdly often prefer to talk to AI therapists rather than real people because they feel they're not being judged, for example. So there's definitely a lot of advantages, but we risk dehumanization, we risk people no longer being good at communicating with other people because they basically only are talking to other to chatbots and are never challenged, basically.
Rodney, we're going to get to robotics just after this. But
no, I want to actually comment on this. When I commute, I listen to satellite radio and I listen to TV political shows. They have a different set of ads than the TV has. And the major set of ads I hear in San Francisco is for psychic networks. You get to talk to a psychic. And by the way, they reject 98% of the psychics who apply to them. So I don't know who they are. But it's to me, it's the same thing. It's a need for someone to listen to you in a way that where the psychics want to get you back for more and more, so they tell you things you want to hear. And we know about confabulation with large language models. They tell you things you want to hear largely, or things that you'll react to. So not being an optimist or a pessimist about at all, it's not just technology that can do stuff, it's how it interacts with people is so important. And you're seeing that secondary effect maybe here rather than the primary effect that you're trying to talk about in terms of therapy for people. That's not necessarily what they think they want. And never forget the user. The user humans are so powerful, they drive everything. The human user, the human customer.
Let's talk about robotics, which is a place where I think users and consumers are really interesting, because our relationship with robots is almost inherently different than our relationship with generative AI. I mean, ChatGPT doesn't exist anywhere in corporeal physical space. It's practically invisible. Whereas robots, we have to reckon with their presence, with the fact that they are always taking up space. It seems to me that one of the most interesting parts of the frontier in robotics, or at least in our ability to have machines that can see the world, is self-driving cars. There's been a lot of news in the last few weeks about how Waymo, which is the self-driving car division of Alphabet, which is the company that owns Google, they're expanding the number of cities that they're operating in. What should we take from the expansion of Waymo and self-driving cars? Where are we in this revolution?
Yeah, things are moving along. I cannot go outside of my door in San Francisco when I'm walking or driving without seeing a self-driving car. That's been true for a few years now. That's not the experience that most people in the world have. It was mainly just in certain parts of San Francisco.
It's not the experience in D.C. or the D.C. area, I don't think, at all.
Sorry?
It's not the experience in D.C. or the D.C. area at all, I don't think.
So two things. I want to get back to the ads I hear. The other sort of ads I hear are, we need truck drivers. We'll give you more money than anyone else. 2017, everyone was saying self-driving cars, self-driving trucks are here. People stopped wanting to go into truck driving because it wasn't the future. Didn't turn out that way. It was much harder than people expected. By the way, the first time I saw a self-driving car drive at over 55 miles an hour for 20 miles on a freeway was in 1987. So they've been around a long time, but we've just got excited about them again. But they're a lot better than they were because deep learning lets you label what's going on. But we had this over expectation that because they could sort of work in 2017, all the major car companies said, we're going to have self-driving cars for consumers by 2020. None of them have them yet. And it's taken a lot longer to get the taxi service working. Tremendous amount of effort, both for Waymo, for the big three as I see them, Waymo, Cruise for GM, which is shut down over safety concerns. There used to be a lot of those on the roads in San Francisco, and Zoox. They're the three that have had some success at sort of scale of hundreds or thousands of cars deployed at once. But it's the long tail problem. Driving where things are fine is good. When things go a little wrong, I ride these cars all the time. I feel I should because I'm a roboticist. I talk about robotics, so I'm in them all the time. When the sun was at the wrong angle for a while, the cars would stop, put the brakes on as they were driving. So a piece of plastic floating in front is really bad. Or kids, in their teens, knowing that you can stop the car by putting your foot out from the sidewalk and torturing them, which works if they're truly empty. But if there's a person in there, they get really pissed off. So the kids only go after the really empty ones because they're not going to get the social reaction from
human-robot etiquette isn't where it needs to be right now, clearly.
The other thing that was very popular in San Francisco for a while was to put orange cones on the hood of Waymos. There's an orange cone there. I can't move. So.
Just in the last few minutes that we have, I would love you to tell me where you think, taking self-driving cars aside, where you think the frontier of robotics is most frothy, where robots are making the biggest difference in the economy right now? And then I have a follow-up question for you about robots.
Well, this is self-serving. This is what my company's doing, but there are other companies doing it. Partially because of COVID, fulfillment in warehouses, getting goods to people, has changed drastically over the last 5 years. And there just are not enough people who want to work in warehouses or can do the work in warehouses or the last mile of fulfillment. So there's a big push for automation in that. It's a lot easier than self-driving cars, because if you're in a warehouse, it's a controlled environment, the lighting's rather constant, there aren't random plastic bags flying around, it's just a lot cleaner. So that's where the big push is coming, fulfillment, and all the way out to the last mile.
The other place I'm interested in robots, and really you can think of this as robotics and AI more broadly, is in geriatric use cases with aging. I feel like, just as an anecdotal news consumer here, that Japan and South Korea are always at the cutting edge of trying to figure out how robots can work with their older populations, and they are on average older than almost any other country in the world. What are we seeing right now in terms of using AI or using robotics to help older people in a world where there's just going to be more of them decade after decade?
Yeah. I think there's a huge potential actually for AI technologies to be deployed in a positive way for the aging population. This is a place where you really have a need. People can't necessarily improve their memory at an older age. So you need to help people with maybe augmenting memory, augmenting communication skills, decision making, etc. So personally, I'm very excited about that area. We've been doing these workshops at the Media Lab at MIT with people aged 70 to 94 that came to join us at MIT to co-design and co-invent with us and truly come up with technologies that ultimately preserve human dignity, agency, and really optimize sort of the safety and their independence in their lives so they can live independently, safely, longer in their own homes.
Patty?
I'm a little disappointed. As a 1954 baby, 70 and older. Thanks, Patty.
Just made it.
You're just cutting.
You guys can fight backstage. Roddy, Padney, thank you very much.
Here to discuss quantum computing, facts, fiction, and the future, please welcome Karina Chow, COO of Google Quantum AI.
Hi everyone, really excited to be here with you today. I'm going to be telling a short story with pictures, and then Derek will come out for a short conversation. This story is called Quantum Computing, Facts, Fiction, and the Future, and I'm going to start with Act 1, Facts. This is an image of a version of a quantum computer. You can see here there's a lot of components, thousands and thousands of components going into this. And a first question you might ask is, why? Right? Why bother to build this computer? Why bother to do all of this work? Why bother to care? Why do people care about this project? The answer to that can be captured in this quote from Nobel Prize winner Richard Feynman. He says this: "Nature isn't classical, damn it. If you want to make a simulation of nature, you'd better make it quantum mechanical." Look, even with today's best AI, it is difficult, in fact impossible in many cases, to simulate nature exactly. And this capability could give us many interesting applications. I'll share one that is personally motivating for me. 20 years ago, my husband, then friend, was facing a really tough cancer diagnosis. He went through chemo, he went through radiation, nothing was working. Finally, thanks to an experimental treatment, his life was saved. Fast forward to today, he's an oncologist and a cancer biologist. He's helping to treat other patients. Right? And not everybody is so lucky. Right? There are untreatable cancers. There are many other diseases and conditions. If we as a society together really could better understand nature, we would increase our chances of solving these problems and helping more people. And that is where quantum computers come in. The thesis here is that quantum computers will be a powerful tool. We already talked about quantum simulation, this ability to simulate, to exactly calculate the behavior of molecules and materials. This is expected to have an exponential speedup. That is, calculation performed on a quantum computer will be exponentially faster than on a classical computer. Quantum machine learning is another area that is expected to have a speedup. Now, this is machine learning on quantum data, so data like magnetic data, electronic data, data from quantum sensors. This is planned, identified to actually have, again, an exponential speedup. Another way to think about this is that quantum computers will be able to learn from exponentially less quantum data than classical computers will. And this provides potentially many, many opportunities. There are other applications as well, and this is what drives us. The mission at Google Quantum AI is this: to build best-in-class quantum computing for otherwise unsolvable problems. To give you some intuition of how this works, why is it that some problems are going to be faster on quantum computers? You can see here, right, all other forms of computing from thousands of years ago to today, fundamentally, inherently, they are similar, right? From abacus to, early computers to our phones to supercomputers today, they all operate on Boolean logic. That is the languages of zeros and ones. So any type of calculation that you perform, right? Let's say multiplying two numbers together, you would take exactly fundamentally the same algorithmic steps to calculate it. Quantum computers are completely different. They operate on the language of quantum physics. So a quantum bit, known as a qubit, rather than having to be in a 0 or a 1 state, a quantum bit can actually be in a combination of those two states in fractions of 0 and 1 at the same time. This means the algorithmic steps are completely different, which really enables completely new paradigms for some types of problems. So while we and many others are working very hard to push to these ultimate quantum computers, it's important to note that actually early processors are already being used for discoveries, right? So quantum processors are already being used to identify new observations. For example, the first observation of a time crystal, exploration of complex many-body physics, and discovery of entirely new systems. For example, a system where A plus B does not equal B plus A. There's a lot more I could talk about here, but I want to get to Act 2, fiction. Now this act is important because there is a lot of fiction out there. One common myth is that quantum computers are already better than supercomputers. The fact is, to date, no quantum computer has outperformed a supercomputer on a real-world application. Here's a picture of how to think about this. On the screen, you can see a graph. On the y-axis is difficulty, right? So you can see different levels of difficulty along that y-axis. Beyond brute force, that means it would take maybe days on a laptop. Classically expensive, taking something like months on a supercomputer. And then classically intractable, something that would take years on a supercomputer, right? So difficulty is on one axis. On this x-axis here is usefulness, right? And you can see commercial relevance as one marker here. The three experiments that I just talked about, which are examples of discoveries that are possible today, they all sit in this lower left-hand quadrant, right? So they are super interesting, not yet classically impossible, and not yet commercially relevant. Still very interesting discoveries. Quantum computers are already an interesting tool. There's also examples already today of the two extremes. So on the far right here, you've got chemical simulation. Again, we talked about that. Of course, that is extremely useful. The chemical simulations that are possible on today's quantum processors are not yet beyond, the computation of a couple days on a laptop. The other extreme on the top left, you can see called random circuit sampling. This is the only experimental demonstration to date of a problem called random circuit sampling that is impossible on the world's best supercomputer. You can see that's amazing. It's above classically intractable. Google demonstrated this in 2019, but it is all the way to the left on this usefulness axis. To date, it's a benchmark problem, hasn't been used for real applications. And as I said, there are many other discoveries. You can see them all on this plot. Every single one to date falls within one of these three quadrants. There have been no experiments demonstrated yet in this upper right-hand quadrant of quantum benefit. And you can imagine that's an amazing grail that the entire field is working to get to. And of course, as algorithms continue to develop, as the field continues to push hardware, better systems, we expect to start seeing some examples there. Myth number 2. Quantum computers will replace your computer. Now, this is one that we get a lot. This myth is, I think, quite common. And the fact is that quantum computers will be complementary to classical computers. They're going to outperform classical computers for some, not all, classes of problems. So again, using this plot that we just talked about, the myth is shown here in the purple, right? Ultimately, in 10 years, 100 years, 1,000 years, quantum computers are going to outperform classical ones on every single type of problem. Every problem will fit into quantum benefit. Now, that is a myth. We know that ultimately, even after these best quantum computers are built, there will still be many problems for which classical computers are the better option, and they should be used there. There will be some examples for which quantum computers are the better option, and together you can imagine even more powerful toolbox. Right? Quantum computers will be yet another tool in the human toolbox to address problems. So when you hear claims like this, and as I said, there's a lot of fiction out there, here's a number of factors that you can think about to evaluate the claims yourself. First one, comparison to classical computing. Where does this claim actually fall along the y-axis? Number 2, real-world application. Where does this claim actually fall along the x-axis? And then expert validation. To what degree do other experts also agree that this claim was real? Myth number 3, the more qubits, the better. This one is common as well. And I think like everything, quantity, not just quality, is important. And so one way to think about this is to look at a measure of quality. Here's one such measure called the gate error rate. It tells you about how much error there is in your system, how many errors there are for every number of gate operations you apply. And if you look at even the best physical qubits today, the best physical quantum bits today, they all fall in this range of 10 to the minus 2 to 10 to the minus 4. That is one error in every 100 to 10,000 gates applied. Now that's great. It's been many years to get there, but it is so far from practical applications. If you look at what's actually needed to do these types of chemical, molecular, material simulations that we care about, that is many, many, many orders of magnitude. In order to get there, we're going to need something called quantum error correction. So again, when you see claims like this, look, I've got 1,000 qubits, 10,000 qubits, 100,000 qubits, there's a number of things to consider. Number 1, of course, the physical qubit count. You do need more qubits for calculations. Number 2, the physical qubit quality. How good are the qubits that you've actually developed? The speed, the qubit connectivity, how fast can these computations actually be performed? And then ultimately the error rate. How good is that error rate? How good is the quantum error correction to actually take you to practical applications? And this question takes us to Act 3, the future. So what will it actually take to build a quantum computer? You can see Google's roadmap to a practical quantum computer here on the screen. We've got a series of milestones, the first called Milestone 1, M1, a beyond classical benchmark, the first time that a quantum processor has ever been demonstrated to perform a problem that is impossible for classical computers. This was that point on the upper left-hand quadrant of the graph that I showed earlier. That was demonstrated at Google in 2019. A second milestone, Milestone 2, a logical qubit prototype. To what degree can we actually start to prove that quantum error correction exists, that it's possible, and we can actually get down to the error rates that matter for practical computation? That was demonstrated at Google last year, 2023. Where we're headed next is something called milestone 3. Some people call it the transistor moment. It is this demonstration that you can actually get quantum error correction down low enough that you have, what would be a building block, a transistor, something like a logical qubit that is long-lived, where multiple of these could start to be combined together to actually get exponential suppression of errors, get to the problems that people are really excited about. Now, of course, along this roadmap are also the applications. This purple line here is really important. Right? The point of building a quantum computer is not just the computer itself. It's a science experiment. The purpose is not to be just a science experiment. It want it to be useful. So what is possible after each milestone? More and more capabilities are opened up such that a large number of capabilities and applications are expected after a milestone 6 computer. And of course, this is the ultimate motivation, right? Being possible to calculate things for drug discovery, for fusion energy, fertilizer production, quantum machine learning. All of these problems on the screen have quantum computing. They have quantum problems, questions at their heart, and it is really what drives us. How else could a quantum computer be used? Think back to the 1940s, the 1950s, when the earliest versions of today's computers were being developed. No one could have imagined all the different ways that we use those computers today, right? And we expect the same thing to be true for quantum computers. There are probably many possibilities out there people haven't imagined yet. Earlier this year, we partnered with X Prize to launch a competition called Quantum for Real World Impact. It was really designed to do exactly this, get more people thinking about this question of how quantum computers can be used so we can really start to push possibilities of applications. Of course, as expected, a new workforce is needed to make this future possible. And you're going to need developers, creators, people to think about how to use the computer. We're also going to need a lot of people in hardware, in software, electronics, teachers, artists, creators, really to all come together, bring their perspectives, and make this computer possible and make it useful. I'll close the story with another quote from Richard Feynman. He says, "By golly, it's a wonderful problem because it doesn't look so easy." It's absolutely not easy. It's extremely difficult. It's challenging, but it is fun. It's exciting to work on, and there are many opportunities. Thanks.
Please welcome back Derek Thompson.
Thank you for that. I have a few questions. Let's break down the questions into fact versus future, because I like the way that you broke it down. Fact, time crystals. What are they? They sound very cool. It sounds like something from a Marvel film, and I want to understand how the thing that I think belongs in the Quantumania actually exists in the cosmos of quantum computing. So how can I and everyone in this audience go home and impress someone with our understanding of what time crystals are?
Yes, it is a fantastic phrase. I think many people are familiar with crystals, right? So maybe if you wear a diamond ring or you have gemstone, right? Crystals are materials that have a periodic repetition in space. So diamond is carbon repeated in a specific pattern. That's what gives rise to a lot of different properties. A time crystal is exactly what it sounds like with that definition. It is a material that has properties that repeat in time. And that was first discovered on a quantum processor.
Why doesn't every material have properties that repeat in time? I am passing through time. My body is more, I'm shedding, skin cells, but like more or less, people are seeing a consistent Derek passing through a fourth-dimensional time vector. Why am I not a time crystal? Am I a time crystal? Because that'd be neat.
I don't know, Derek, are you?
We'll ask the quantum computer.
We all know about time, right? This fourth dimension, it takes us and it changes us. Like every single moment, we are slightly different. There is some force acting on us where we get changed even in the most slightest of ways, maybe not perceptible to the human eye, but certainly at a molecular level. Time crystals are unique in that even as they go through time, they stay the same in this periodic fashion.
I see. So they are a matter that is unique to all other matter in that they stay consistent through time and suffer no kind of debilitation or amplification. They are simply, they are.
Yes.
Interesting. So like legacy, or like, you know, is a kind of like metaphorical time crystal. You should want like the Atlantic's legacy to persist over time. That is the time crystal that we're aiming for. It might be a metaphor too far for us here.
You know, it could be.
I'm very interested in this
It
idea.
could be, and there could be, you know, the ultimate ideal. Like you know what you want the legacy to be, and you want it to last that way forever.
Right.
You know that never lasts, right?
Right.
With environment changes, history happens, and things are perceived differently than they were in time. But that is not true for the time crystals.
I like this, time crystals. Okay, I'm going to remember time crystals. The second question I have is about the future. So let's say the year is 2040, and we regather. Everyone here comes back, and you're back to talk about quantum computing. And you're talking to us in the year 2040 about how quantum computing is changing our life, how the discoveries of, or the products of quantum computing are making a difference in our life in 2040. What do you think you'll be saying to us in 2040 when you say, now, as we all know, quantum computing has done ABC? How would you fill in that blank?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a way that I would hope to fill in that blank, right? The future is always impossible to predict exactly. I showed on the screen, you know, our roadmap to a practical quantum computer, right? And I showed 6 milestones, and I said, hey, milestone 6 is this is where we expect almost all, you know, useful practical applications to exist here. You can never, again, it's science, you can never say exactly. Our best estimation is that we would get to something like a milestone 6 computer around the year 2033. So let's say it's now 2040, and that, you know, let's hope that we've achieved this milestone 6 computer. I would hope to be back here to say, look, we are already using this computer together with many different partners to design better cancer drugs. This is helping us really understand important molecules in the body, different proteins, at a molecular scale, such that we can really target and identify really effective cancer drugs. I would hope that would be one answer. Right, a second, I had also shown on the screen, you know, examples in energy, like fusion energy. A lot of people talk about this. It is really difficult to design a fusion reactor, right? There are many different components. Everyone needs to be just so. You know, how do you get fusion reaction to be sustained? I would hope that quantum computing also helps us to understand, right, at its heart, fusion that's a quantum physics problem. I would hope quantum computers enable us to really model what is happening inside of that reactor. How should I design a better lens or better film, better materials for this reactor so that we can actually start to build these, you know, useful types of materials. Same thing for solar cells, batteries. There's a lot of different options. So I would hope to have at least a couple examples.
Fusion technology, therapies for cancer, that sounds pretty good to me. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
For a conversation on the future of work and cities, please welcome Diana Lind, writer and visiting fellow at the SNF Agora Institute at Johns Hopkins University, Dror Poleg, economic historian and author, with Jerusalem Demsis, staff writer at The Atlantic.
All right, hello. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
We are here to talk about the future of work in cities, which is exciting. We are in a city, so hopefully it's not grim, but you two are here to tell us if we should worry about it. So my first question for you is, how are you optimistic or pessimistic about cities in the short term? And just answer with that question, then we'll get into the reasons why. Diana?
I'm going to go with optimistic.
Optimistic, okay.
Yeah.
Dror?
In the short term, I hate to be that guy, but I'll say pessimistic.
You're pessimistic, okay. We love some disagreement on the panel. So why are you pessimistic?
I think that there's still a lot of complacency and denial in trying to hold on to the previous paradigm. While I think some fundamental drivers of how cities should look, should be designed, even should be funded, and even of their purpose have changed quite substantially. Not just because of COVID, but COVID kind of laid it bare and expedited it. And I feel like a lot of cities are still in denial about it. They still make it very hard for their businesses and residents to adapt to what they actually need. And also, just from a purely technical perspective, a lot of the damage that even was caused by COVID, which started 5 years ago, is going to unfold quite slowly. Like a lot of leases, most of the leases that were signed pre-COVID have not come up for renewal yet. So there's still a lot of downsizing coming up. Yeah. with effects on retail and on housing decisions and on municipal budgets. So my pessimism is mostly about the complacency and denial, not about the lack of ability or the lack of importance of cities. I think that they're going to be more important than ever in this new paradigm.
So why do you think cities are so complacent right now?
One, because that's how humans are. You know, with the retail crisis, for example, with e-commerce, we had 25 years to prepare for what was happening. Everyone was talking about e-commerce. And yet, until COVID, you still had those empty stores asking for high rents and pretending that someone will one day come and pay for them. The lenders of those buildings also wanted to pretend that one day someone will come and pay for them. The tax collectors also wanted to pretend that one day someone will come and pay for them. So until there was a real crisis that helped kind of clear the market, no one let go. And I think COVID started a crisis for office, but we'll need another external shock to help finish the crisis.
Diana, why do you think Dror is so wrong?
I think there are bits of what Dror said that are definitely right, but I'm pretty optimistic for a couple of reasons. I think that while cities are still grappling with the post-pandemic remote work economy, you're really starting to see, year by year, that the various different indicators are starting to change, right? That there are more people that are coming back to the office, that there are more people using public transit. I think that there are issues like, commercial real estate that are certainly, have potential for being bad, but at the same time, a lot of those buildings that were kind of single-use office spaces have the potential to be reconfigured, whether it is as housing or as office space for sort of smaller tenants. There's the potential there for that being a bit more vibrant. I'd say, crime levels, that was like a big story during the pandemic, have really plummeted and are now at the same as pre-pandemic, or in some cases lower than pre-pandemic violent crime levels. So I think those are also some really good indicators. And I think that there are other legacies from the pandemic that are causing cities to really sort of free themselves perhaps from some of that complacency and say, we had some of these streets pedestrianized during COVID. Well, why don't we try doing that again or keep them pedestrianized, starting to rethink some of that. And I think that, there are some cities that are recognizing like we kind of have to go for broke at this point because the other option of just kind of doing things the way that we had for so long is just not working anymore, and we're going to have to figure out a solution. So I think that there are concerns about, for example, cities having kind of lower tax revenue as a result of commercial properties being lower. But for many cities, that this is not their first time at this rodeo. They've had to deal with balancing budgets before. They've had to deal with economic downturns before, and are prepared for that, and are starting to think about what kind of ways to remix their tax revenue sources. So I'm optimistic that I think of cities as being these kind of cradles of innovation, and I think that this is actually kind of a moment when this really difficult period has sparked some real, a real reckoning of recognizing that, we've got to change how we're doing things. And I don't want to also forget that there's also been a housing boom that kind of happened during the pandemic, where a lot of construction was built with those super low interest rates that's now coming online in a lot of cities and bringing down the cost of housing. So I am optimistic in the short term.
So I think the fundamental thing that I remember during the pandemic is it doesn't take that many people living in a city for it to feel like a tsunami has hit your town, right? When we think about in the 1970s, New York, Minneapolis, Chicago, Atlanta, these cities experienced just a 10% decline in population when we all felt like, well, for those of us who were there, felt like it was a really desperate situation. People thought there was the end of these big cities. And so I think really focusing in on why it is that people may or may not want to stay and live in cities, why people may stop moving into them, could be really helpful. So Dror, what is keeping people from wanting to live in cities at the level, or what is keeping population away from them that would alleviate your concerns?
One part of the paradox that we're experiencing is that actually people want to live in cities, and cities can be in trouble at the same time. They're also booming economically, and they're in trouble at the same time. which again, it's quite unusual and shows us that something changed in the way our economy actually functions. That we can have an all-time high in the stock market, we can have an AI boom in San Francisco, and yet overall employment in San Francisco is lower today than it was pre-COVID. And if you follow the trend in terms of economic growth and population growth, it's about 12% below trend. Offices there are about 25, 30%, not even leased, let alone more that are empty. So I think people actually want to live in cities, and if they can live anywhere, we're seeing in New York that more people are actually wanting to live in Manhattan and in New York than before. So apartment rental costs and buying costs are actually higher than ever, while offices are struggling. The problem is that to accommodate that, cities have to build more housing, they have to allow more office conversions, they have to allow people to experiment more in terms of what they build, they have to make it faster, they have to take the uncertainty out of it, so that if people are experimenting and willing to take a bet on those cities, whether it is in terms of moving there or investing and building there, that it will be a little easier for them. And they're not doing that. So I think in terms of what will attract people to cities, what has always attracted them to cities, which is, again, whether it's the culture, the job opportunities, the social opportunities, access to all sorts of amenities. And part of the problem that we face now is that we probably need cities that look a bit more like cities looked like 120, 150 years ago than they did 70 years ago.
In what way?
In the way that currently our cities are really, the focal point is the office. Even when you look at them, you can see the office dominate the skyline, dictate the transportation network, dictate the assumption about what kind of retail you're going to have there, what kind of people are you expecting to come and at what time of day.
So like Sweet Green open at noon.
Yeah. And actually the cities we need are much more mixed, much more livable and with places to live. And not necessarily anything in particular, but more as a field for experimentation, which is something that you can do in a city quickly. You can kind of change tenants, change layouts, mix and match different things. So, 100-something years ago, we started zoning our cities, and under the assumption that as planners, we have a very clear view of what's going to happen in which part, during which hours of the day. We survived partly the transition from an industrial economy to like an office-based economy, because the office-based economy that we had in 1950, 1960 was very much like the industrial economy. It still relied on like masses of people that had identical education, identical incomes, clear schedules. But for a while now, our economy has not behaved like that, but kind of through the force of inertia, our cities kind of still managed to accommodate it until COVID kind of flipped the question on its head. And instead of asking, why should you work from home or why should we do it differently, we're starting now from zero and saying, okay, why should I come back here? Why should I work like this at all? Why should I renew my lease now that I have other options? So that's where we are. So we need cities that can accommodate the actual economy that we have. And I think when we talk about the future of work, we can probably elaborate more on what that is.
And Diana, you've written about this kind of idea too, right? This idea that cities need to invest in second places. Can you talk to us about what that is and what that would look like?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think that there's a hunger for people to not just be at home or not just to be in their office, to think about, the typical, third place would be your kind of coffee shop or your public park or what have you.
Library.
Your library. And so on. And so I think that there's a need for people to find other places, other ways of working with each other, connecting with people, socializing. I think that, there's been a way in which a lot of the media has covered this issue of the urban doom loop and the way in which,
Drawer, you coined this term, right?
I didn't coin the term. I'm just riding the wave.
You're just talking, yeah.
No, it's a possibility. It's not something that
but yeah, the idea that, commercial real estate will lower tax revenues and that will lead to cuts in services. I think we've not spend enough time really talking about the human doom loop that has happened over the past couple of years since the pandemic, with people, spending more time at home, people spending more time online, people walking less, drinking more. Like, there's a lot of really not positive indicators that have come out in terms of our human behavior. So finding other kinds of places that aren't in people's homes and aren't in people's offices per se, I think could be really powerful for cities to sort of focus on in terms of like building social connection and also, you know, potentially building new economies and coming up with, you know, creative ideas.
And what does that look like? Just like a workspaces that are open to the public, investing in libraries? What would that mean?
I think it would be, you know, all of those sorts of things. I think, you know, for a lot of different cities, it could be building out that type of social infrastructure, whether it is, you know, in libraries or it is in co-working spaces. It could be, you know, rethinking where a co-working space would be, instead of it being in, say, a WeWork, it being potentially in a school or something like that. So just kind of being creative about what the different kinds of physical spaces that people could have and what types of social connections you'd make as a result.
Am I allowed to agree with that?
You are.
Yeah.
So just to add one more point, you know, during the 16th, 17th century, 17th, 18th century, the world was going through kind of a similar period. It was kind of early industrialization, opening to trade, migration to cities, and a lot of uncertainty about what kind of physical environment the economy actually needed. And the thing that solved the problem then was the coffee shop. So a lot of the largest institutions, financial companies, insurance companies, even the New York Stock Exchange started in a coffee shop in Manhattan. They had these kind of liminal, multi-purpose spaces that allowed people to experiment without committing too much cost, without taking on overhead, without having a clear idea of what they'll need in 5 years or 10 years. And in a sense, the city as a whole served that purpose. Like the purpose of a city, among other things, is to lower transaction costs for everyone, to be almost like a replacement for a firm, to allow people to find whatever they need, ad hoc, on demand, try it. If it works, do more of it. If it doesn't work, do less of it, creating these agglomerations that are very efficient at a lower cost. And again, I think part of what we lost and we need to regain back is that notion that we don't know exactly what we need, but we do know that if we enable the city to accommodate a variety of needs, to lower the cost for everyone, to try new things, to experiment, both in terms of construction, but also in terms of socializing, in terms of starting businesses, then it will serve a purpose that only a city can serve, and that will not just help cities survive, but we actually need them to serve that purpose, because we are in a time of great uncertainty. Most of us have no idea what we're doing. Most companies don't know how many employees they need, who exactly is doing what, definitely not what they'll need in a year or in 5 years. So if 20 years ago companies would sign a 10-year lease that the landlord was very happy about, but also the employer wanted the 10-year lease because they wanted to secure those resources, today there's a clear mismatch where the landlord still wants a 10-year lease, the city still collects taxes as if there is a 10-year lease in place, the building is still valued as if it's kind of like a government bond, but the tenants, beyond that kind of struggle between employees and management that the media likes to talk about, management itself just has no idea what it needs 5-10 years down the line. So the main driver of flexibility is the deep change in the nature of how we produce things and how we work. And that's only going to intensify as we go ahead. So another thing to keep in mind, we're still talking about damage control from COVID, but the main wave, the main drivers of change in cities are just starting to warm up on the sidelines in terms of AI and the rise of intangible assets and other deeper change into how we work and how we spend our time.
So both of you are talking, and I think this is something that a lot of remote work boosters have talked about a lot, is that urbanists seem to be very skeptical of remote work and to view remote work as very hostile to cities' ability to thrive and grow. Are the two of you opposed to remote work? Do you think cities should fight back against it? Here in DC, there is some push to get the federal workers back in the office to help revive downtown. How do you guys feel about that?
So I think that, you know, remote work, you can't say that you're 100% against it. It's necessary for some people, some people obviously really prefer it as a job. Am I in favor of people working together, whether that is in their office space or in some in-person fashion? I think yes. I think there are a lot of reasons why working in person with people is really important in terms of you know, just kind of the social connection and clarity and the sort of spontaneity that is provided as a result of it. And I think that there are, a lot of people talk about how remote work has given them a lot more flexibility to, do caregiving and whatnot. And it's a lot of unpaid labor that is being added to a lot of people's lives as a result of kind of taking on those remote work jobs. And I think that people aren't really kind of discussing that as sort of a potential negative, in fact, in people's lives as well. But I think that the reason why remote work is so attractive to people is because living in walking distance to an office or a place where you can collaborate with other people is it's very expensive, right? Mm-hmm. So if we're going to try to figure out some kind of solution to remote work, it shouldn't just be you've got to come back into the office and end of story. It should be figuring out how to make living near where you're working more accessible to a broader range of people. It should be thinking about making sure that your public transit system is actually enabling people to get where they need to go. And it's about, really kind of thinking about how, placing a premium on being together, not necessarily on how many days a week that is. So if you look at, countries in Europe, for example, are creating 4-day work weeks as a way to say, we prioritize getting in, being in person, but we're also recognizing that, especially caregivers need a full day extra off. So I think there's some sort of balance there, and I don't think you can be 100% for or against, But
Dror, to bring in this, there is this, I'm an urbanist, right? But when I look at what people are offered the choice, they chose in the pandemic largely to move to suburbs. Mm-hmm. They chose to move to places that were less walkable. It doesn't mean, of course, we still have really high rents in San Francisco. Lots of people want to live in New York City. It's obviously still true. But you see the relative choice set shift. Once remote work became possible, lots of people made that decision to leave. And lots of people made that decision to go, and when they're offered remote work, they take it. So should that be a lesson to urbanists like us that maybe the market isn't asking for this?
No, one, I don't think we should impose or tell people how they should work. We should respond to the choices that we see. Mm-hmm. I think San Francisco and New York are actually different. In San Francisco, residential rents are significantly lower because people are moving out. So I think part of the failure of keeping those people there or attracting new ones is just the failure of cities to become affordable, to become safe and clean, which is more of an issue in San Francisco. But to me, the bigger story is not the remote, should I work in bed or should I work at an office, but more like the redistribution of work, so distributed work more than anything else, which we started seeing even before COVID with Amazon HQ2 and 3, but even with smaller projects where the most innovative, fastest growing companies needed to hire from larger pools of talent in order to match, in order to get cheaper talent, in order to fit the right person to the right specific task. And they showed a preference to split their core activities to 5 to 10 different locations. And once you saw that happening, you can ask, okay, so why shouldn't it be 50 locations? So it's more about people moving with their high-paying jobs to all sorts of places. Mm-hmm. I don't think they mind going to an office if there's an office nearby. But still, it's a different paradigm. That doesn't mean that everyone will ever come back and work all in the same place. And again, that was true even before COVID, but it was easy to miss because there was no crisis. Mm-hmm. And it kind of looked like the previous paradigm where companies always had branches in different places. But these were not branches. These were core R&D activities that urbanists and economists told us must happen in person because there's synergies and, you learn things and people collide with each other, etc. Mm-hmm. But actually you see that the most innovative things were already developed. Companies like NVIDIA and Amazon and Shopify and Apple with distributed teams that were in an office but were distributed. And I think that's the trend that will intensify. Mm-hmm. And I agree with Diana that if we have more offices closer to people, homes, and more homes closer to where offices are, we'll have a better kind of alignment of the built environment, the actual economy and society that we have.
So despite my best efforts to get you to fight, you agree on a lot of things. But with the last few minutes...
We'll fight after the
off stage. So with the last few minutes, I want to focus on solutions, right? You've kind of tagged a couple of these, but I'm hoping each of you can provide what if you could get cities to focus in one area. I know it's hard because a lot of these are very multi-level policies, but it sounds often like really far away from where we are right now. The idea that the urban form could shape itself around our needs to be walkable, the 15-minute city, these things feel very far away. So in the near term, if we're talking about responding directly to the crisis, so that in 5 years, maybe you're proven wrong and things are better than you expect, what would have changed? What would cities have done?
So I think that they will be better because
Because you're talking
shaking people out of their complacency. But the couple of things I would do is, one, loosen up zoning and planning, like allow people to build and to experiment with whatever they actually want to express their preferences. And second, to invest, despite the lack of funding at the moment, in the envelope around it. So better public transport, cleaner streets, a lot of the programs from COVID that you mentioned that were great, but a lot of cities are rolling them back now. Like in New York, you used to be able to eat outside on the sidewalk, which was amazing, and now they're taking a lot of the sidewalks back to what they were before. So I think, again, loosening, planning and zoning, and improving the stuff that already made those cities great to begin with.
Diana?
Yeah, I would, sort of getting back to that human doom loop idea, I think I would really try to focus on how to encourage in-person life. I do think that we're kind of at this moment between remote work and AI and cell phones and everything else where it can often feel like we're not getting the in-person interaction that we need, and it's having sort of not great consequences for us as people and for our economy. So I would say, build that housing, ensure that your city is able to build the housing it needs, so that people can walk to work instead of having to commute an hour every day, there and back. I would say, build that transportation network so that it's easy for you to actually go to the store instead of having to have, all your groceries delivered. I'd say I'd encourage a pedestrian and a public realm that makes people want to hang out in person and in life, like in real life, so that kids have an alternative rather than just being on their screens, have safe places to go to, and it's not a struggle for a mom looking after 3 kids by herself to get around the city. So thinking about sort of the frame of encouraging people to be able to engage in person, I think that that's going to really benefit an economy, and it's going to make the city a place that people want to be, and I think it's going to make a place that not only people want to live in, but people want to visit. And I think that tourism is a really big part of the sort of post-pandemic economy also. So those would be sort of some of my ideas.
Well, as Jor mentioned, a lot of these policies are up for debate right now, so this is really on you guys to go back to your cities and figure this out. But if you can join me in giving a big thank you to our panelists. Thank you. All right.
We want to thank Calm for their support of the Atlantic's journalism. If you're 21 and above, please join us on the District Pier for happy hour